Welcome to Keimino. I'm really excited to be able to bring you on board with this journey. What we're doing is we're building a platform that will help writers build a following for themselves and their stories. I remember when I was an actor in Toronto, every time I would go into the audition room, there was an actor there that I knew that I wouldn't get the part the minute he showed up. Not because he was a better actor than me, and he might have been, but because he had a following of 20,000 people on social media, and I had a following of 1,500. I want to give you that exact same advantage so that when you give your scripts to a producer that it already has a following, so the producers will sit there and say that is a story I want to produce. In order to just kind of show this, I wanted to bring in Gary Brennan. He was one of my friends from Toronto, and he is a writer, actor, producer, and he just created his own web series. And I wanted to bring him on just to kind of show you the process of how you can go from writer to producer in no time at all. So we talk about Keimino, we talk about his production, and most of all, we talk about the art of storytelling. And so enjoy listening to this conversation. How is your production coming on? Because you were talking last time we talked about the production that you did on December 21st, and I was kind of laughing about that. How's that production going for you?
It's we're it's all been shot,
Yeah,
and we have been taking a long while to edit it as our editor's available because something that's very, very necessary when you cost out and you budget what the film is going to cost to shoot it and produce and the whole thing.
yeah,
You have to remember to bake in a budget for editing. And we never did.
yeah,
So we learned on the way. So we have a really, really terrific guy. His name is Aidan Brett McNally. And he is just a solid individual. He helped us, terrific audio.
yeah,
He helped us cinematography wise, but he's been editing it over time as he's available. We are two minor tweaks away from a complete polish being done, and we're then just going to score it with some music, the copyright-free
yeah,
music that we can get because it's not a heavy sound score
yeah,
requirement. So we're probably about 2 weeks away from being able to book a theater to screen it, to invite some guests, some industry people just to take a look at it. But that will be the complete 6 episode story arc
oh, that'll be fun.
for the first season, after which we'll try to get a broadcast window so that we can turn it into a second
Yeah.
season, which I've story arced at this point.
Oh,
So we're
so you have
anticipating.
the second season ready. You're just not gonna. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does
I,
that
different
look?
outlines and stuff like that.
So what does that look like for you then? Like because you've put all of this effort and all of this money into this, and now you're putting it into and you're renting out a theater,
Yeah.
and you're gonna bring in industry executives. Like who do you invite to that? And you don't need to
Cat,
say names. I'm not looking for names.
yeah.
I'm looking for other stuff.
Yeah. Well, first, anybody in my immediate network who I know, a couple of producer friends that produce 3 or 4 movies a year, some casting people, anybody within the industry that I have immediate accessibility to. And then also the idea would be, where can this fit? So right now we're going to try to get it on a channel through Bell Communications. And there are different levels to Bell where you get broader exposure.
Yeah,
So we would be inviting, if we could, one or two of those principals to take a look at it. The idea ultimately is to maybe get it on the web platform of a network. In my case, it would be CBC, it could be CTV, it could be the television stations here
yeah,
in Canada, but also to the individual episodes could be standalone, and therefore there are film festivals that we would also pitch it to. But for the sake of the screening, it would be people that we can build a networking um, a group with so that we can have conversations and get in the pitch room, use it as a calling card to do other things that we want to do, but also get a second season and make the funding a little more accessible,
yeah.
etc.
Did you so when you were writing them, did you intend to actually have them all as individual, not really connected, but kind of connected?
We did it backwards. I had a day on a show that was shot up here called The Strain, and I ran into the writer at the craft table, which is where everybody sits around and eats, right? You
Yep.
go to, you get a job, you go, great, the craft table, where's the food? And I asked how you story arc something. You said you start from the last episode and you work your way backward to the front so that you can bake in the progression of everything that happens as you story arc each piece. I never did that. The idea behind Drive, which is the name of the webisode series, I just wanted to shoot a pilot and I had the concept written down and I wanted to shoot the pilot and then walk it around town and see if I could get any interest from producers. We ended up shooting 2 episodes in one weekend because we had the camera equipment. I had another idea for a story. They weren't related per se, but the central character, me as Charlie, is threaded throughout the series. So this
Yeah.
would be one more incident. Anyway, we went back to the guy who funded the first two. His name is Sean St. John. Super, super philanthropic, lovely man. And I told him about the story, and he said, "Yeah, okay, I'm in." And so once we did the first 2 episodes, my writing partner, Juan Carlos Velas, said, we should do 4 more and get a package of 6. So we started doing them in chronological order as opposed to starting, okay, let's story arc this whole thing first and then we'll work our way backwards. And we it took us about 2 years to do it all.
Yeah.
So then when you get into editing, you're going, wait a minute, does this make sense? Does this carry over? Okay, so then you start to fix things.
Yeah.
And we've managed to do a really, really great job with Carlos and Aiden. But that was a learning process for us, and we're really happy with the result. But we will do the second season differently. We'll story arc the end and work our way back, and then start to shoot forward if we can get the funding.
Yeah. So when you go into the second season, are you going to bring your writing partner along with you and just kind of same team, same project?
Yeah, because it's a short, it's sort of the way we do is that I write the first script
Yeah.
and then we both go through, then Carlos will write the second version of that. And then we sit down on the third version and we go line by line and we fight for everything that we want. And, that's where the collaboration takes place. But Carlos, he's also, he directed the full series and he's got a lovely intuition about how it can look. And so when he looks at a script that I've written, he goes, okay, how is this actually going to manifest itself and piece together so that there's a real visceral, photographic piece that drives the narrative. And he's extremely intuitive around that. So we usually look at the third pass that we do as on the day, how are we gonna, what are the
Yeah.
pieces that are going to be needed? So yeah, we get along really well. It was sort of like a yin and yang kind of
Yeah.
thing.
How
Yeah.
does it so from what I'm hearing is you're basically writing with your director and
Yes,
writing with your producer almost at the same time.
that's right. Yeah. Uh, and it just kind of like morphed into that. Carlos had he's if you get on IMDb, his name is Juan Carlos Velas. He's an accomplished actor. He's stage actor, film actor. He's the real deal. And he also has a penchant for he works very visually and as without sounding pretentious, he's an actor's director.
Mhm.
So he knows what is required in the work, and we've been actually working in that regard. So uh, he'll say, "Okay, do you want another one? Yeah, I want to try this. Okay, yeah, okay, just embellish this a little bit. I think you need to be a little bit from this point of view, so give it a shot." So it's an inordinately collaborative, and we get what we want. He lets the camera roll for a while, so you just find your moment and then drift into it, and
That's nice.
then yeah, so it's very, very calm. We've created a culture of calm, of open communication, deep respect. Anybody that we have joining us, we just make sure that they're very, very comfortable and that they get what they want in their performance. And that's where he comes from. So it's great because he's got a facility to write, he's got a good facility to direct, but he comes from us being actors as he
Yeah.
directs, as
I
opposed to just
remember
strictly technically.
I remember when I was working with Misha Collins on Supernatural, and I was nervous. It was my first gig. It was my first professional gig,
Yeah.
and I was nervous to the hilt. And I remember I think it was either my first or my second take, and I was speaking, but the words were not words. And it was just like I could not put a sentence together if I tried. And Misha and I'm of course I'm getting more and more nervous as I'm
Yeah.
going because I'm like I'm butchering this. This is terrible. It was probably the worst acting I've ever done in my life was that show.
Yeah.
Um which is funny because that's my professional credit. That's the one that everyone's like, you were on that show? I'm like, yeah. And I wasn't very good on it. The editors saved my butt. But what Misha was like, he could see exactly what was going on, and he sat there and go, hey, hey, just stop. Let's take this over again. And he basically started directing me from that moment. And I'm not gonna lie, he probably saved that scene because I was so stressed out, so anxious because you're told from the beginning if you get the part, you have to make something of that part because you're not going to get a second part if you don't, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so they build this up for these actors that are young and just starting out, and they build it up to be like this is your only shot.
Hmm.
And then they expect you to act well, and it's like, I'm sorry, that's just not
Yeah.
it's not conducive for a good environment where people can be creative and inspired.
Yeah.
However, in saying that, the editor was creative and inspired and saved my bacon and made me look really, really good. And so it's amazing what an editor could do.
Yeah.
But going into this, so how did you find your writing partner? Like what did you look at? Like where did you guys meet? How did this start?
That's great because I never really consider myself somebody who can collaborate. I generally get a little bit territorial, or it's the way that I see this going on, and so collaborating for me it doesn't come terribly naturally. I can be very, very differential, and I don't have to be right, but I'm really like it. Also, we have a third partner by the name of Steve Dykstra, and he writes, and so the three of us get together, and it actually ironically works out well. But I never really felt that I was predisposed to doing stuff. But Steve's a strong writer, and Carlos is good. So the three of us get together. But the way that I met Carlos is that we worked at an organization where we would coach. We did some corporate coaching together. And so I met him there. And then, very ironically, we were on a movie of the week called The Flint Water Crisis. And Bruce Beresford, who directed Driving Miss Daisy,
Okay.
was actually the director on Flint. And so Carlos and I were in the same vehicle driving out to locations. And we talked about ideas that we had. And he had an idea, and I had one that was similar. And we just started baking it. And so Carlos, Steve, and I sat down and we wrote out an entire series and a number of scripts on the way to doing that. But we found out that we actually got along pretty well and we heard each other and I wasn't as precious about what I thought needed to be in there, and I learned how to be a little bit more egalitarian about things. But that's how we met, and then that was a great way because we created our own writers' room and we had the storyboards and the whole works, and we just sort of like sorted it out, and we wrote a series, and it didn't go anywhere, but that was what we started to do. So that when Drive came along, it was during COVID. And I said, guys, I got this idea. They said, okay, we're all in. Let's see what happens. So that's how we met with Carlos and I initially, and then he had been working with Steve on other projects. So I kind of
When
like got married in.
So you were talking about how you guys re wrote a project beforehand and it didn't
Yeah.
really work out. Why? Can I, if you don't mind me asking, what was it that caused it not to really work out?
I think some of the feedback we got was there was a little bit of a supernatural aspect to it, and there wasn't anything around at the time where people thought that the idea would hold up. And I'm not completely convinced that they're right about that, but the different places that we pitched it to said, no, there are too many different things that need to happen here.
Yeah.
And because we don't We don't have a track record yet. It wasn't like, hey, we love the idea, let's work this through. Or
Yeah,
yeah, I love it, let's option it and we'll put it into development and et cetera, et cetera. So we've not given up on it, because it's got wheels, I think. But we learned an awful lot about what is actually within the genre, what actually works, and where
yeah,
we took license, and it kind of it became something that people thought, I don't know that that's really credible. So you create a world and you go, could that really happen? And I think that we kind of fell in a little bit of that. I don't know that this could really happen. So when you create a world, all the rules have to make sense.
yeah,
As fantastic as that world is, like Star Trek
yeah.
or
Star Wars, you've got magic people that are floating things across with no with the
yeah,
Force, but in that world that makes sense and no one
yeah,
questions it. Like when I saw that in when I first watched Star Wars, I didn't question, oh, why is that X-wing floating out of the swamp? I was
yeah.
like, oh, hey, cool. He's a really powerful Jedi.
Exactly. Exactly. Uh, so yes, there's sort of like when I think we learned that we have to be consistent with the rules of the world. And it was a real, oh, I guess this doesn't fit. Wow, okay, I didn't see that. So sometimes the fish can't recognize water, but we learned an awful lot in that process. But there are other things that are really, really redeeming about the series, so we can still
Yeah.
use it to do other things.
Do you think that if you would have so kind of I want to kind of bring Keimino in this because
Yeah, yeah.
do you think that with that script, do you think that Keimino could have found the legs on Keimino, giving feedback and all that stuff and getting followers? Do you think it would have actually gathered a following when shown to a whole bunch of people?
For the concept of Camino, the way that
Yeah,
you're designing this, it would have been really, I think it would have been really valuable to get everybody else's point of view, and then you distill from there what seems to be the common thread, what seems to work. We never got that coverage, we never got that feedback. And so if you've got a collective of opinions that say, this worked for me, I could really, really believe in this. And I think where I was confused or where you kind of lost me was at this point. And
yeah.
we didn't have that kind of direction. I pitched it to a couple of people that were showrunners, etc. And they said,
Well,
nah, this,
it's very easy to tell you what doesn't work.
yep,
It's very easy to sit there and go, "Oh, this doesn't work because I don't see this person coming in at the last minute and
yep.
saving them because the rules of the world don't work." It's very easy to say that, but it's
Hmm.
not very. It's like I've been watching this series on Amazon Prime. It's the Dave House of David series.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
And it's a takeoff of the story of David and Goliath. And
Okay.
kind of the stuff that's going in. The first episode is abysmal. If you could skip that, the series is not bad. It's a steady 6 out of 10 in my books.
Okay.
Which to me, I like Bible stories, so I'm watching it. My wife doesn't really like it, but anyways, not
It's
important.
well, the Bible is so rich
Yes,
with characters and
and
it's so
stories
lyrically
and
built. I mean, if you've got a template or something like that, that's the Bible. I mean,
yeah.
it is, you know, pretty good writers in that one. Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Anyways, but one of the things that they do really well is they build relationships. And it's like I remember having this conversation with my wife where she was like, "Oh, I didn't even notice that." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the relationship between the king and the to be king, even though the king doesn't know that he's going to be king, is really that father-son dynamic that
Yeah.
you would need to have for a lot of the whole story, whether you know the story or not. There's a lot of stuff that goes on between them, but he needs to have that dynamic for David to refuse to kill him in the future.
Ah,
And
yeah.
and so there's all of that dynamics that I'm sitting there going, oh wow, they did a really good job with this. They did a really good job with that. And it's stuff that the Bible doesn't necessarily say. And I don't know if it happened that way, but it's really fun to imagine.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of stuff where when you read something and you're like, oh, that dynamic, that's the exact same as me and my son, or that's the
Hmm.
exact same as this. And that's kind of the feedback that you need to know. It's like when I'm doing this, I can't cut that part out.
Hmm.
I remember I was writing a script. It's called The Dreamer, and it was a true story about a girl who was in a cult, and she had to make the decision between her now husband. It's a true story, but it's her now husband and being in that cult because she couldn't get both. And so it's the life that she's known up until now versus the life that she wants to live. and it was a really beautiful story. And but the constant but I had to take it to get the feedback, and I brought it to feedback, and it got shot down in the water because they were like, your main problem looks like two religions fighting. It doesn't look like someone choosing love. And I was like, ah, okay. However, there was also these little characters, these little relationships on the side that built the story, that they're like, man, we love that. We just don't like where this ended, where the whole battle, the whole struggle ended up. And I was like, ah, because I built the whole story up to that point with all of these really fun characters. And it's like, and I sat there and like, okay, now I know what doesn't work.
Yeah.
But what would have been great was a community that said, yes, this doesn't work, but maybe this would. And having that kind of almost a writer's room, like you said, because I wrote this by myself in a week, 40 hours writing this feature film, like straight 10-hour days, basically. Um, and then I was sitting there going, okay, well, how do I fix it now? Because I've lived in this world now so constantly that I actually didn't know where to fix it. And and so it's now sitting torn apart in my files, torn apart as I'm trying to put it back together. But now again, I don't know how to put it. Like I don't know the way to put it back together to make it work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that but that's the feedback that people need. It's like it's not what doesn't work. It's how can you make it work.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's really the core there. So
Yeah, there's a real benefit to hearing a collective feedback, a community feedback where it's been vetted through anybody who sits down to write it, or to sit down to read it with a view to actually saying, you know what, I think that what's not working here started three scenes earlier. And if you can make the change here, what you're trying to achieve would probably pay off there, or
yeah,
it would make more sense, or you would keep me held to it. And being able to discern where those pieces are, that's where the value of the feedback comes from.
yeah,
Uh, as opposed to, well, I think you ought to do this, I think you ought to do that,
yeah,
because that's an opinion, which is fine. But if you've got a community where people go, okay, Joel, I see where you're going with this,
yeah,
and I love the conflict between this woman who's grown up in this crucible of a cult, and now she sees this person who she wants to spend her life with. I get where you're going.
yeah,
Here's where you lost me. Here's where I think an adjustment could be made.
yeah,
So that, and if you've got a collective experience where all of the feedback kind of dances around that one point, then you can respond to it and say, okay, let me thread this out. There will always be people that will have an opinion about why you should rewrite it, and
yeah,
those opinions will be based on their perception. But I think the strength of what the community you're trying to build is you get to vet the fringe and find the core. This
yeah,
keeps on coming up. I remember watching Bill Hader say that you can give your script to your friends and they'll always be right about what doesn't work.
yeah,
They're not always right about how to fix it, but you're creating a community where there's real discernment. And if the thrust is to be supportive, then you're going to be able to harness a core level of feedback that's going to constantly come back to the main, okay, everybody's citing this as the problem. And more or less, people are suggesting that this is a possible way to fix it. And they seem to have a lot more in common. And I think there's a lot of credibility that you can get out of that. It's that I can see where that would be a very productive, useful tool.
yeah. It's the idea is when in the midst of many counselors, you'll find wisdom. And it doesn't mean that every counselor has wisdom.
Hmm.
It's the core of if I've got 70 people who read the script, all of them say the same thing doesn't work. 20 of them say fix it this way, 10% say fix it this way, and the rest are saying that I need to start doing a sci-fi, then then I know chances are that's the 20 that are agreeing are probably the most likely place to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if the 20 and the 10 don't work, then I can start creating a sci-fi with it and see what happens. No.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's like when you have a whole bunch of wise counselor, when you have a whole bunch of counsel, you can discern a lot easier because you're seeing it through a bunch of different eyes.
Yeah.
Um, I had a friend who was writing a story for the LGBTQ community, and he was not LGBTQ.
Okay.
And so he wrote this story, and then he took it, and what he had to do is he had to take it to his friends and say, "Does this make sense?" Because I've never lived in this community.
Yeah.
And it was interesting how that shaped the story forward. And it changed completely because
Mm-hmm.
it was like I'm a Christian, and if I'm writing or speaking to someone who's in that community,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of difference of way of doing things.
Yes.
And that's a very important thing of who you're writing for, and knowing that and getting their opinion, and that's the beauty of having that community, is because
Mm-hmm.
there's some people that you can sit there and go, they're part of this community, they're part of this community. I'm going to put a little more weight on their opinions
Mm-hmm.
because those are the people that I'm going after, and you can filter all of that. If in a community built like what I'm looking for with Keimino, it's really about being able to get that feedback and filter it so that you know where to go next.
Well, I think you've touched on something that's really instrumental about what you're trying to create with Camino because y as and without sounding pretentious, an artist, craftsperson
Yeah,
has an idea because they're part of it comes from their humanity and what they look at. And they may be at tangent with the culture where they have the idea for the story. It doesn't invalidate their idea because they're not part of the culture.
yeah,
And it behooves them to learn as much about that as possible so that if you're writing something where this is my experience as I perceive your culture
yeah,
to endure it, that does something that provokes me to want to have a point of view about it or to express that point of view.
yeah,
It's wonderful when you have a resource where you can be guided. And again, fish can't recognize water, or
yeah,
you don't know enough about it, but you've got this so there's a thread that connects us, even
yeah,
though I'm not part of this culture,
yeah,
but there's a humanistic thread, and I want to explore that. So I need your voice here to
yeah,
help me. I think that's where you build, that's where that's where story can be so informing as opposed to siloed.
yeah,
Uh, one of our episodes was in Drive was called Third Choice, and it was about a woman, BIPOC, who uh, had to make a choice between letting one of two of her direct reports go because of budgets, et cetera, et cetera. And she didn't want either of them to go. And I was writing it, and I was thinking, well, who am I to write this? But I gave it to Juan Carlos, who's from El Salvador and has experienced being a person with brown skin in a very, very conservative
yeah,
environment and what he endured. And then so he brought I said, I've got an idea. Guide me here. I
yeah,
wrote the idea. He then gave me a point of view. And then we went to the actress who was playing the main character, who's BIPOC. And I said, change anything, guide me. I want to get this right. And so we actually did very, very well. And she said, no, you've been able to get it. But the idea is valid. Now, what part of the community is available to me so we can represent this without looking through the prism that people
yeah,
live rather than the prism that I have an idea about. So
yeah,
I think that your example of of getting all kinds of guidance from
yeah,
people who live a dynamic that you might not have been exposed to or had to deal with directly is just this, that's where the wisdom comes through. I think that's a smart thing
yeah,
that you did.
yeah. And because I believe that when you're writing, honestly, I believe that there's no new stories. We could be on Mars, but it's going to tell the same story 100 times.
Yep.
But what makes it different is the lens that we're putting on to tell it. And I might tell the same story whether it's a romantic comedy or a horror film, and I could tell the exact same story with both lenses, and it's gonna be very different, and it's
Mhm.
gonna reach a different audience, but it's the same story. It's the
Mhm.
same story about this girl who's got to choose make this decision. The characters might shift slightly to make more sense, but that basic story is all the same, and
Mhm.
it really depends on which lens you're trying to. And if I'm like, I'm not a horror film writer. I've written a couple just for me, just because I wanted to prove to someone I could do it. But but it's like, but you sit there and it's like, okay, there's certain easy ways to do things
Mhm.
if you're looking for these specific genre groupings. And if you're not used to that, like I always tell people, if you want to write for horror, you need to watch a whole bunch of horror movies before you do
You
it.
do.
If you want to write for a romantic comedy, you should love romantic comedies. If um we had this conversation last time about When Harry Met Sally and your friend that said it was a terrible movie. And it's like it's 100% correct, because if I don't like romantic movies, I'm gonna
Mhm.
think it's really boring. Especially if I'm used to the Expendables or John Wick or something
Yeah.
like that. I'm gonna look at When Harry Met Sally and be like, man, this is boring.
Yep.
But if I love romantic comedies, I'm gonna look at When Harry Met Sally and I'm gonna be like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, this is a classic masterpiece.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think you're right about being exposed to, I mean, whatever your genre is, whatever you're drifting toward, to really learn that because there are some structural rules that keep the audience with you,
yeah,
particularly in a horror movie. Horror movie is almost like a thriller in that something's going to happen all the time where the ante keeps on growing. So if you're going to write that, that's going to have a different pacing, then it's going to be the stakes are going to be of a different nature than when Harry met Sally in a rom-com. There's so, things are always going to get worse for all the characters and the conflict's always going to, so there's a formula to it. But there are certain guideposts that if you're writing a horror movie, this has to happen
yeah,
and this has to happen and this has to happen. But I take your point. You just inundate yourself with as many, and then you get to play with the rules after
yeah.
you've got the other ones down.
It's
Yeah,
like
for sure.
there was this book that I read, and you've probably heard it because I think everyone who's ever written a script heard it. And it was Blake Snyder's. Oh, the cat. My mind just blanked on the name. Literally, I had it and I said his name, and
If it was it
kill the
Save the
cat,
Cat,
save the
Save
cat,
the Cat, Save the
save the
Cat.
cat.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to kill the cat, and I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to save the cat.
Right,
But
right. That's
the
a
beauty.
different book.
Yeah, that's the horror film version. Uh,
Yeah, the
uh,
cat's got 9 lives, so good luck,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. You could kill it once or twice, but it's gonna learn and it's not coming
Yeah,
back.
that's right.
Um, but one of the things I love about that Save the Cat is it gives you this beat sheet that you can follow for a to bring about a good movie, and it goes mostly across most genres. As far, I don't write horror, so I'm now thinking that maybe that's not the best format for a horror film, um but the beauty of that is you can sit there and you've got this outline that says, okay, if I want to keep things moving, then if I can fill out this beat sheet,
Hmm.
then I can now really I can create a story that moves, and it doesn't move too slowly, and it paces yourself really well.
Hmm.
Generally, unless of course you nothing happens between beat one and beat five, and you're like, it's the same beat.
Yeah,
But that's the problem that exists between keyboard and chair. So
right.
um,
But I think it's great. I'm one of the few people who hasn't read that particular
yeah,
book, but I'm reading one, How to Make a good script great. Um, and I'll get the author in a bit. I don't want to say the wrong name, but something happens between roughly page 10 and 12. And you go, oh, and then something kind of cataclysmic happens around page 25 to 30. And you go, oh, here we go into the story. This is the precursor where things get turned around. And then there's the point of where the character is thrown into the new challenge, whether they want to or not.
yeah,
Uh, so having those. having those guideposts without being they can be anchors without being constraining.
Yeah,
Um, but they're very, very useful where you go, okay, this has to happen at this point
yeah,
because they know where audience's attention. There's one David Mamet. Uh, I followed him on on a master class,
yeah,
and he said the way that television was written is that every act in television, and this may apply to film, was basically, I mean, there's act one, two, and three, but in television, it was all built around commercials because TV basically sold soap. So you had to keep people sticking around to watch the commercials. So you built some drama in their lives through a television show so that they would stick around for the commercial and buy the product. It sounds like his back ass words, but that really was it. I've got this soap. I think I'll create a television show so people will buy my soap. I mean, that's really what it was about. But he said, we're wired every 7 minutes to kind of like look around and check things out. And it goes back to being around the fire in nature that during storytelling, every 7 to 10 minutes, people just say, okay, are there any predators around? We're all good. Okay, I'm
yeah,
back in the story. So our brain is wired for these breaks. And so television writing has been all around respecting the fact that, at a certain point, this breaks and you leave a cliffhanger to get people to come back after the commercial to watch the next part of the show so that and so the everything was a construct around the way that we're just wired to take a look around every 7 to 10 minutes. And if you clock out a series, you will see that yeah, the acts are usually that long.
yeah. No, see, I've never put those two together. Never.
Mhm.
So, I do know that everything is built around commercials. Everything in North America is built around commercials and advertising, and
Yeah,
it breaks my heart.
yeah, I know.
But the beauty of TV is that I I remember I watched a lot of old TV, Hogan's Heroes, Gilligan's Island, Bewitched. I love those old classics.
Mhm.
One of the things I love about them and is if you go back far enough, people they've got the show and then all of a sudden there's this commercial baked into the show. And then it's not those ones. You have to go back a little further for that. But you look at like Beverly Hillbillies, and you've got that kind of stuff. And looking at like I've been watching a show called Beast Wars. It's Mr. Beast thing on Amazon Prime. As you could tell, I'm an Amazon Prime person at this point. I can only really afford one streaming service at a time. So right now it's Amazon Prime.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah.
but what one of the things that I love that he does is he implants his sponsors into his show. And so you'll be watching, and all of a sudden, T-Mobile is the sponsor for this thing over here. And so he'll be like, "This is the T-Mobile Magenta House or whatever it is."
Oh, really? Okay.
And I thought that the way he does it is really good because there is no point where I want to skip the commercial. So people are doing this thing as he's talking about T-Mobile's is presenting this, and I thought he's really really good job about that, where he brings out his sponsors and he does a little ad during the show, and it's a throwback all the way to like the Johnny Carson days when Johnny Carson would be doing something, and in the middle he's talking about how and my mind's blanking on it, but how this department store over here, Wegmans or whatever it was,
Right.
and how you can find everything that you ever need at one store and how great it is. And I'm like, he's doing the exact same thing. And because he found that's the best way to actually get to do the sponsors and really honor the sponsors. And there's a part of me that's like, I want TV to go back to that. I love that baking it in. There was a show I watched, grew up on, called Chuck. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I don't know that one.
Okay, it's Zachary Levi, Yvonne Strahovski. They're both big stars now, but they starred in the show together in about 2007. And they had their sponsor was Subway, and so every episode you see Subway. Well, not every episode, but most every like two or three times a season at least, you would see Subway come in as this giant sign, or someone's walking in talking about this chicken teriyaki sub,
Oh, really? Okay.
and how great it is because they were the ones that helped fund and save the show. And and so it's like you see this little bits of things, and I love it because it's campy. It's because they didn't even try. They're not putting it in. They just have some guy walking and being like, "Man, this sweet chicken teriyaki sub from Subway is so good." It's like screw, and so they spend like 15 seconds on this dialogue about how good this sub is. It has nothing to do with the show, and then
That's
they continue with the show. And when done well, it is so good.
right.
And that has nothing to do with what we were talking about. It's what you were saying kind of brought me to that.
Well, I mean, product placement is usually in police procedurals. It's usually a Ford LTD or something that pulls up and, it stops right where the camera lens is and you see Ford, right? And then the cops get out of the car and they do the thing. Or they're in the bar and it's sort of like it's Budweiser or it's Heineken and nobody's making a big deal out of it, but they've
Yeah,
really got the product placement there. But I've never seen anything as overt in an actual TV show. I've seen it. I mean, I'm old enough to remember.
yeah,
Uh, and I watched Johnny Carson before it became a YouTube,
yeah,
where you go back and whatever. And there was always just going to take a moment out to pay the rent. Brought to you by Texaco, right?
yeah,
Texaco was like sponsoring an awful lot of television. And Bob Hope would always in the middle of his variety show saying, "This is brought to you by Texaco." So yeah, they would break frame and they would just overtly pitch the
yeah,
product. The culture was this is how we get television going. And so it actually had a natural place with, let's all show our gratitude for the sponsor because
yeah.
without it, we wouldn't be here. So let's give them a nod and a high five kind of thing. And of course, that was really what drove everybody's, that's what drove advertising.
Yeah.
Advertising is about television so that television can be about advertising. But I've
So
never seen it baked into the dialogue.
yeah, it
Uh,
is. It is. At first, when I first saw it, because I was a kid at the time, I was like 17 or 18 or 19 or something like that, and I remember looking at that, being like, "Man, this is so campy. This is so bad." And now I look back on it with fondness, being like, "That was so campy. It was so good."
yeah. Yep. Yep.
But it's like lots of times it's about how do we fund our films? Like how is it that because lots of times the advertising stuff is only there because we're trying to fund our dreams.
Yeah.
Everybody is trying to find someone to fund their dreams, and Coca-Cola is trying to find someone who will pitch their product for them.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and 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 that's kind of one of the things. And I didn't even plan to go here, but that's
Yeah.
one of the things that I love about Keimino, is it gives you the demographics. It gives you the stuff where I know that this many people want to watch my film. I know that this many people want to see this made, and so I'm like, now it's a lot easier to get made. I don't have to have Subway where I'm like, hey, this chicken teriyaki, which I should get Subway to really sponsor this episode. Like I really
Yeah, I
should.
think so. I
I
think
really should.
yeah,
Um,
I've got a craving right now. So
yeah,
thank
all right.
you.
We're just gonna take a break here. Our
Yeah.
sponsors are gonna be on the screen while I go get a chicken teriyaki. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Um, but when you sit there and you've got the right when you've got the right information and you're taking it to sponsors, it makes the
Mhm.
decision a lot easier for them. Um, when you were because you funded your film, was it just self-funded? Did you self-fund it, or did you get anyone sponsoring it, or
Um, Sean St. John, it was I met him doing some corporate coaching. And we were going to work together. And I had the idea for this film. And actually, I went to Sean, who's wonderfully philanthropic.
yeah,
He's just an exemplary human being. He's overcome an awful lot of challenges where he's the real deal. And so I pitched him on it, and I said, "Here's what this show is about, and I want to do." 2 episodes in one weekend because we've got the equipment. And I said, I'll give you $2,000 worth of corporate coaching if you give me $1,000 to shoot the 2 episodes. And so he really liked the idea of what I was doing. He said, sure, I can help you. And he did without batting an eye. And then we did it. And then we came back to Sean. We said, so here's our thinking. And he went, okay. And so we worked out a contract and there would be remuneration and the whole thing pending any sales that we get or any monies that come out of the whole thing. So we worked that out. Um, but the, it was because of Sean helping us out. We didn't do any crowdfunding or
Yeah.
GoFundMe stuff or anything like that. There are,
Can I
yeah,
ask you? I'm really curious because there's
yeah,
not the contract stuff I don't know a ton about.
yeah,
And you don't have to answer this because
yeah,
this is a closed contract and this is not expected.
yeah.
What what's what kind of like what deal does it make as far as investing in film for profit? Because I don't see a lot of that.
No, and there is
Is he is there an expectancy to make a profit, or did he just basically write the check and say, if you make a profit, I
basically
want
that
something?
was it. That was it. So the idea would be, here's what we want to do. We want to use this as a calling card to get a broadcast window
Yeah,
on like a cable station that will have hits to it, unless we were to upload it to your favorite Amazon.Prime, and for 99 cents you can watch an episode, or
yeah,
we launch it on YouTube and we get a following so that when you go to the next level of actual funding, they say, oh, you've had 10,000 hits. Therefore, we know that there's an audience for this so that we can give
yeah.
money. This is all grant money that corporations, that communication companies provide on one level or another. So you've got some data points. So we basically said we need some data points, but we think that this really, really has legs. And so the view was, okay, this is an investment.
Hmm.
I like the idea that I can be associated with something. I like the idea that you're doing something and the message is redemptive, and I like to be part of
Yeah,
that. And so there was an intrinsic reason, just because of the kind of human being Sean is, that led to his support. With the tacit agreement is yes, and we worked it out in the contract to where there would be remuneration. Um, but it was really about, okay, what does it take to get this thing going so that we can get it in front of a lot of people and build it out into
yeah.
something that becomes greater, where there would be financial remuneration, but there would also be some longevity to the series. And right now we're in the formative stages, having shot it and just about editing it. So it's the next step that hopefully we can fulfill. And again, there,
Where are you looking at where will I be able to watch it if like because I'm nowhere near Toronto. I can't go to your rented theater that you want to do. Um,
come on up. There is
okay,
a
well, it's 8 hour drive.
yeah,
I'll be there tomorrow at
yeah, okay. Well, they're on the same time zone, so that'll work out. There's a Bell Shaw Communications is a major cable company,
yeah,
and they're a major media company, and they have a subsidiary called Bell Fibe or Bell TV1,
yeah,
and that's on whatever channel it's on. So if your browser and your internet, etc., is Bell and your television package is Bell, then on Bell you can actually, it's a button on your remote. You can actually, it's within the network. Outside of that, you can also, I think you can also get access to it as well. But that's Bell TV 5,
yeah,
TV 1 or Bell 5. And there are a number of shows that are on there. And once you get a following, the next level up is something called the Bell Fund, and that can give you a bigger budget
yeah,
to do things, and it's a better gateway into maybe getting it to a network web platform,
yeah,
because it's got more credence and credibility behind it. We shot this one. ACTRA is the actors union in Canada, compared to SAG or AFTRA in the States.
yeah,
SAG is Screen Actors Guild, but AFTRA is mostly television. So in order to get this done, we had a limited budget, as generous as Sean was, but we did it as an ACTRA co-op, which is to say everybody gets a piece of it, and there's a contract
Oh,
that is outlined so that each individual episode, whoever the actor is that joins us, they get 5% of the proceeds in the event that this were ever to make money. And so it's all distributed so that everybody on that particular episode has a piece of the ownership.
yeah,
And that allowed us not to have to pay union rates in order to have somebody show up. And now there are different, for webisodes, there are different tiers depending on how much each episode costs per minute. And so there's a different rate that makes it easier if you don't have much of a budget. You can still shoot a show at a very low rate as opposed to paying actor scale and actor principal scale, things like that.
yeah. So when you're done, like so you've made this and now you're gonna go up to do you do they fund the next season to go up to that next level? Or is it like, no, we're gonna take this season that you've made up to that next level?
Great question. So what happens is that Bell basically operates from a licensing fee, like a broadcast licensing fee. So generally what they do is you go to Bell and you say, and you break down a budget, you provide them with a proposal and what the narrative is going to be and how it's reflective of society. And there are different pockets of their jurisdiction that they try to serve the community because it's basically
Mhm.
community television with a minimal budget, but one that's manageable. So you go to them with an idea and they say, great, okay, so we really like your idea. Here's $20,000, and that's what the broadcast fee is for you to let us broadcast it for 3 months. Now, the thing is that it's considered a broadcast licensing fee to use your product, but they give you the money up front so you can actually produce the film. We did it back asswards. We said we shot it, and now it's going to Bell by saying, well, you know what? We have already shot this for you, so if you just pay us a broadcast fee, then we will pay people back and they will broadcast it for 3 months. If it gets hits, then that allows us to then go to the next funding level. Whether or not that means, yeah, we'll give you more money, but and then it's a different department within Bell, but we'll give you more money and we're going to it's enough to qualify you back on Bell Fibe or Bell TV One, or we can help support you with a budget, get other people to come in as investors and build out your series and so we will put it on our broadcast webisode channel, or we won't. But that's a very, very complex. I'm not that familiar with it. But basically, there's lots of conversations where they say, "Yeah, we're going to greenlight this for you, and we'll see how it does in the numbers, and give us 3 episodes, and if it goes, then we'll give you more money to shoot 4 or 5 or 6. We want another 6 episodes out of this for season 2." So it depends on how whether we can get Bell Fibe to actually put it on their channel, and then
So
we kind of go from there.
you had mentioned if it gets hits, if it gets hits, and you've said this a few times now.
Yeah,
If it gets hits, then we do this. What level of hits are you looking for? And can you just clarify what you mean by hits?
great. You click on, for instance, you have your favorite show. What is it? The television show that you watch on Amazon Prime. What's it
Uh,
called?
Beast Wars is was what I was watching,
Okay, so
or
they
House of
know.
David. House of David. I
Okay,
think
House
that's
of
what you're
David.
looking for.
Okay, so House of David. So with digital, and I don't know an awful lot about it, but with the streaming channels, because it's all digital, they know with your browsing package or with your streaming package, they know that you, with your account, watches this show. It's just a digital recording, a digital record of every time you turn on that show. So it's not like they have to go out and do a Nielsen's ratings and find out what your favorite show is and approximate things. They actually know. You click on that show, that's a satellite trail to your account, and they know that you've done it, and that's what your subscription is. It's the same thing with Bell Fibe. The number of people that actually turn on that show, it's a digital
Okay, so it's a
recording.
digital thing, so they can be like, okay, they've clicked on this and now they're
Yeah,
watching it.
right.
It's more like a streaming service, a localized streaming service, and less of a channel.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yes, that's it. I'm a bit older, so I haven't quite adapted to all of the current parlance around streaming versus channel, but yes, that's exactly
No
it.
worries. I have to sit here and go like and sit there because sometimes there's terminology that I don't know, and it's not that I don't know it. I just don't know the word that people use for it.
Yeah,
It's a lot like and that data, it's a lot like the metadata that I'm planning on using with Keimino. It's like I'm going to know that you click on it. I know that you're reading the script, and I know that whether or not you gave feedback or not.
exactly.
And in order for like I think you talked about this last time with that social contract that
Yeah,
says there and goes, yeah, I'm going to give feedback because I want you to succeed, or I want
yes.
this story to succeed, so I'm going to give it feedback because I think it'd be really fun to actually see made.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So, great question. Hits are the metadata that you get.
yeah.
It's like a YouTube channel. Yeah, about 4,000 people actually clicked onto my Instagram thing. And
What's your goal then for this? How many hits is your goal?
I don't know the number that's required. I really haven't investigated it enough. But to get a following where, and it would be a groundswell kind of following, which is where we are right now. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's out there, but people have access to so much. So I don't know, if we had, if we got 10,000 hits, then you go and say, yeah, we got an audience of 10,000 people, and they can go, well, that justifies the paperwork here. Here's a check for X. So,
Yeah,
10,000, but to just have it grow, because we think the stories are redemptive and there is a social purpose theme behind them. So it would be a matter of, okay, now how can we, and bring on more people to actually help us get better at doing it too. I mean, if you can blow it open so that you got a bit of a writer's room and you get a showrunner, which
yeah,
you need in order to get to get onto a network television show they want. I can come and say to them and say, look, we got 6 episodes, et cetera. Put us on your and we'll do another 6. And they say, well, we need a showrunner. And you need a showrunner that's done work within the last 2 or 3 years. So you've got to go searching for a showrunner who can actually say, okay, I've run the writer's room and this is what I've done. And so I've got the bona fides in order to support this show. And then the networks go, okay, there's an adult in the room. And so,
oh, that is so accurate.
yeah, right. So, okay, yeah, right. Okay, we know you're creative. We know you want to do something, but we need an adult in the room. So somebody's got to be driving the car, but instead of you just going joyriding, right?
Hmm.
So, and there's
You
a quality
We'll
control in
give
there
you
and
a
all that stuff.
tour bus, but the person driving has to
It's
have a license.
exactly it. And that's essentially it. And so, and most creators are the showrunners. I mean, they've got the bona fides, and so it's not unusual that the writer is also a producer or the showrunner who oversees everything. We're not that elaborate. We're looking for 6 episodes that are going to run between 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not like you're producing, it's not the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
The budgets are pretty lean. They're comfortable. But it's not like we're renting caravans and honey
yeah,
wagons, and that would be nice one day, but we're pretty lean. So, but they still need to know that there's an adult that's driving the tour bus. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's see, I always find that like I've written a lot, so I've never actually been able to get mine produced, get my
Hmm.
product produced. Though I have friends, like I had a friend that he created a mini series called Reese. And they got so much traction on, I think it was YouTube or Vimeo. Anyways, they
Yep.
got so much traction that they actually made it into a mini series for TV.
That's
And it
fantastic.
was,
But
and
but but that's exactly the principle, right? They
yeah,
got traction, right? They got hits, right?
yeah. So, but when you're talking about yours, I know that like we don't know what the number is for Bell. That's for Bell to say, we're gonna give it to you to do this. But where would you be happy? Like if you were to sit there and go, this will be a success if I reach this.
I think the wish list for me, and again, it's relative to what I don't know,
Yeah,
because I don't know about. But if 50,000 people would say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to click on this for and spend my 10 minutes over lunch or my 10 minutes or whatever, or
yeah,
before I start to do the other thing," then 50,000 would be, and if we could hold them, that would be a credible endorsement to say, okay, we've got it right. I mean, if 25,000 people, if 10,000 people, I'd be happy.
Yeah,
But, if we're going to spitball and blue sky here, if 50,000 people said, yeah, we really like this on the level for the budget and the look and the
yeah,
resources that we've been able to do in order to produce this show, then that would let us know that, okay, we have legitimacy. We're doing something well.
yeah,
We understand the nature of what it is that we're doing, and we're doing it well.
yeah.
Um, so that would I'd pick 50 grand. I don't know how reasonable that is, but
I
that
don't
would be the wish list.
I don't know how reasonable it is either because I've never put something up. I had a friend that made a movie on Amazon Prime, and he didn't quite get enough to pay for the movie. I think he was like 50,000 of the 55,000 he needed that did not come in.
Oh, ouch,
Like
ouch.
he made the movie. The investor put in 40 grand. He put in 15 of his own grand because he forgot there was like you did. He forgot some things that were really necessary. And so he put in his own $15,000 and he spent 10 years paying it off because he just actually closed that production because it went bankrupt because he's like it was a great movie. And I say great because it was really, really good for the budget that they had.
Hmm.
But it never got traction. It never got the clicks.
Well, I mean, and again, I know limited amounts of it because they don't play in that world yet. But if you've got a if you got a movie that's $100,000, you need to put in at least $100,000 in advertising. I mean, so
So
an awful lot of the budget is, well, this is a $400 billion budget. Yeah, okay, so we got to spend another 400 billion on
so
advertising.
they say so the number that I've heard from my friend who did that, advertising was one of the things that he completely forgot.
Yeah,
Completely. So he's an artist at heart. He's a great man. Love him. In fact, I'm hoping to do another project with him soon here.
yeah.
But he was like after having the conversation, after having this whole project and having the conversation, he's like, if I was to do it again, 25% of my budget is set aside for advertising, and
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Because that would have, and then once you've got the demographic information for where to spend that 25, that 10,000, that 25% of your budget, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, my people are in, I'm spitballing here, Wisconsin males aged 18 to 25. So I'm going to go put an ad at the Green Bay Packers game and I'm going to be able to get more of that audience.
Hmm.
But if I don't know those demographics, it's really, really hard for me to go say these people like this project.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's again, that's one of the things I want to do with Keimino is I want to make sure that amateurs have that information so they can make their money go further.
Well, I think that there's also the there's so much social media. So, for instance, if I take my phone in with Drive and we've got 6 episodes, and
Yeah,
I sit with some of the cast and some of the Steve and Sean, and I record their point of view about it on the phone, on my phone, and then I cut in an excerpt of a scene that they're talking about. I can upload that to my Instagram account, and the followers are going to see a 20-second soundbite that's going to help promote the film or
yeah,
that's going to help promote the series. And so, on a grassroots level, that can be shared and reposted, et cetera.
yeah,
And if you let the rope out slowly and you time the number of times you're going to be doing that using Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of that stuff. That's one area that is fairly inexpensive if you want to invest the time in it because you've already got a subscription to it. That goes a long way. That
yeah,
could actually generate some producer to say, yeah, you seem to have an aptitude for this, and I've seen it all over the place. Great. We can see where we can add an ad agency to this so the credibility increases
yeah,
that is within your own
yeah,
control to a degree, as opposed to I must go and pay thousands of dollars for a
yeah,
billboard, and I can only do it through this ad agency,
yeah,
and that's a studio thing. I mean, there's an awful lot of gatekeeping that is more mercurial now than it used to be.
yeah. and it just makes a big difference. It just makes
Yeah.
a huge difference. And I think if we can, my goal is to get rid of the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
I don't like
Yeah.
gatekeepers. They're important. Don't get me wrong, they're important. If I'm a CEO and I've got a secretary, there's a reason she's there. And it's important, but I think a lot of times a lot of the real stories that need to be told don't get told because there's a gatekeeper in the way.
Right. Well, you've got
And
because everybody's looking at marketing and will it make money because that's ostensibly what
yeah,
they're doing. Yeah.
well, and they have to make money. That's the goal. Is that you if they're like Disney has to make money. I mean, the way they're spending money right now, it doesn't look like it, but they have to make money somewhere.
Yeah. Hmm.
Otherwise they can't keep making movies or they can't make theme parks or
Yeah.
I think
That's
they've
right.
got a clothing line that's going to be coming out soon here. Like
Disney has a clothing line. Will it be
they just
reflective of all their shows? Is that
I
what it
hope
is?
not.
Or
I hope it's not reflective of their shows. Um, but no, they just hired someone to do their clothing, to do a clothing line with them. And I can't remember. I just saw it on a news site that I was looking at Disney, and they're like, "Hey, they just hired this person. His name was Bobby something or another."
Mhm.
I have no idea who he is. So, um, but it's like they're trying to diversify to make money because they realize that I don't know if I told you this, but I did some research and they lost $1 billion almost $1 billion in 2023 on their
I think you
movies.
mentioned it. I can't remember how that happened. What was the
Um,
story there?
so the story is that they put $1 billion into movies, and they're all mostly Marvel and Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And the only one that came out, only one movie came out with a profit, and that was Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And so we're moving a couple years from there. But basically they lost $1 billion on the other 10 movies that they put up. One was like a $500 million budget and they only made $100 million on it.
Wow.
And it was like and then this Snow White thing that just came out. And it's like, oh my goodness. And that was that was a nightmare. Like I don't even know, like at some point they should have I don't know if I've been watching some YouTube stuff on it and they're just talking about the person who starred in it, and they were like, "That was a nightmare. We probably should have just reshot it with her without her," kind of thing is what
Oh
they were
no,
saying.
really? Oh my
Oh
gosh.
yeah, they like there was a point like these are just some of the stories that I've heard is that they were trying to get a social media expert to kind of show her how to use her social media to promote the movie, and so they started with like a hey, I get to be Snow White and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or whatever, and then the next post was Free Palestine. And it's like, so basically she took that and was like, this is my opinions. This is my opinions. And instead of promoting the movie, she would alienate half the audience.
Oh heavens. Okay.
And
Okay.
whether it doesn't matter what your political standing
No,
is
no,
or not, there's
no.
a point where you keep your mouth shut until the production's over, until they've made their money, and then you say your piece. But at some
Okay.
point in time, you have to know, and they actually had to hire a social media person to follow her around constantly for the entire time from filming to when it was released to try and mitigate the damage that she would do on social media.
Okay.
And then they had the Seven Dwarves, right? And there was a celebrity that came out and said, this is demeaning that dwarves would be playing in these roles. And so they had these seven actors.
Hmm.
I don't know what the right term, little people, but these seven actors that were little people that were playing the seven dwarves, and then they cut them right out of the film and put CGI dwarves in because it wasn't it because this celebrity was saying how demeaning it was. And so they've increased cost after cost after cost after cost, and then no one wants to watch the movie because the main actress alienated everybody, all the entire audience.
And well, that's a whole nother kind of conversation
Yeah,
because we're living in a world where we can engage issues that are very, very relevant.
yeah,
And there's also the equation around business. And I know that, there's a lot that goes into casting,
yeah.
wherein if you're an influencer and you've got a following of 500,000
Oh,
We both do a great audition, and
Gary,
then
I lost you there for a second. Can you go back to when you're an influencer and you've got
right.
500,000?
Okay, let's allow that you're an influencer with about 5,000 people, 500,000 people following you, and you and I go in and we do the same role. I mean, we're clearly different. I'm infinitely younger than you are, but let's say that we're going
Absolutely.
into yeah. Let's say that you and I are basically the same type, or they could go
Yeah.
in any direction, right? Uh, it's a person with the following that is really considered well. They've already got an audience.
Yeah.
And so there's that component that never used to live before. Um, and there's an awful lot of very, very pressing, salient issues politically, worldwide. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a pretty noisy place right now. And so on the one hand, you have a vocal opportunity to say, you know what, I support this cause irrespective of what the politics is, or I don't support it. And it bleeds into the corporate mandate, right?
Yeah.
And so we're in that area where there are the agreements, and you either live up to that agreement
Yeah.
and say, fair enough, or you don't accept that agreement and you don't participate in the project.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answer, but you just say, here's what this is. I conform to these conditions, fair enough. If I don't think I can conform to those conditions, fair enough as well.
Yeah.
We don't participate. So, but no, there's an awful lot of, yeah, I had no idea that that was the story around.
There's a lot more to it than that, and there's a lot of ins and outs. I've watched a couple videos, but I realize if I'm not looking at both perspectives, then
Yeah,
I'm not actually getting the full story. And so honestly, even in saying what I said,
yeah,
there's a chance that I'm only getting half that story.
right.
Because there are causes that, and if she believes in free Palestine, then she has to have the ability to say that.
Yeah,
But again, you have to know that that you have to be able to make money on what you're doing,
yeah,
and you have to be
exactly.
able to build the following that you're building. Otherwise,
Hmm.
you won't have the ability to say what needs to be said.
Right.
Um,
Well, I mean, that's a big question. There are lots of people, and I think I saw one celebrity who was giving a keynote address. And but this is taking us off topic, so we can get back
yeah,
to Camino and whatever. But well, you know what? To the degree that it's about community,
yeah,
which is what you're trying to build, there would be there would be an understanding of what here's the focus of what this is. And then there's the other things that may not be that focused, but then you're doing that and the two are separate because this
yeah,
is what is done is intended. But there are many people who have high profile who are silent because there would be career recriminations that they're worried about, or there would be branding, or they've got, you know, a three or four uh, project deal on one level or another. And
yeah,
are you so then, from a business
mhm,
point of view, and I recognize that there are some people that say, yeah, we're behind this and no apologies,
yeah,
and we're just going to spend the money and you're our person, as opposed to others that say, well, we like to keep things neutral because we don't want to alienate an audience and that's
yeah.
money and bums in the seats and yada yada. So it's Dodge City right now.
Well, and but you're 100% right on that because there are issues that I would speak up about. Like
Yeah,
if I had the I wouldn't stop being me.
yeah,
The difference is that I would have 50,000 people following me while I'm being me.
exactly.
And there's a danger that when you've got 50,000 people following you that you have shifted
Mhm.
to be what those 50,000 people want, and that's not good either.
Yeah,
And so there is a balance on this.
yeah,
And that's like it's like if I'm writing a script and I've got 70 people saying, "Hey, you need to shift this. Like this doesn't work. You need to shift this." I can sit there and go, "Okay, I do need to shift it." Obviously, if I've got a majority of people telling me that it doesn't work, yes, I need to shift it, but I can shift it to something that's still in line with the whole point of the story.
yes,
if if like the script I was talking about earlier, if that fight between the two, yeah, I don't want there to be a fight between the two sects in that story, but it's like it still needs to have that level of weight on it for her. But the
well,
problem was the people who
yeah.
were listening to it, that level of weight of the actual argument was on it for them. And that was the hard part of it because they that was anyways, but it's like I have to sit there and go, okay, now how can I make this still the same weight for her without actually with taking the weight of this off of my audience?
Hmm.
And that's not easy at all.
No, no.
And then that's why a community is important. That's why community, and that's why having feedback, good, pointed, short feedback is really important. And you can actually create a better story with that feedback.
Yeah, I
So that
think
the yeah, sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
So it's so that the because a lot of times stories need to be told, and a lot of times they're not popular stories, but they need to be told.
Hmm.
And just because someone's like, do you know what, that doesn't work. It's like, no, no, that works, but it's not popular. And there's a big difference between those two.
Hmm.
Because you don't want, if you're writing a story that needs to be told, your audience needs to understand the difference between that doesn't work and I didn't like how that made me feel.
Yeah, those are two different things. There, I when I always said that doesn't work, it's more about execution.
Yeah,
Did you execute? Did you live up to what this story needs, that this story needs in order to be told,
yeah,
as opposed to having a political stance about I'm reading something that I'm watching something that doesn't make me
yeah,
feel good. I mean, it's a very North American thing to have a happy ending, right? And they lived happily ever after. But there are lots of films that don't end well. There are plays like there are tragedies that Shakespeare was right where they don't end on a high note.
yeah,
And there are films that live into that piece of storytelling. So for me, it always comes down to the execution. The feedback that we ended up getting is that I don't think we executed as well. Um, but every story, I believe exactly what you said there. If there's something that pinches you to say, ouch, then that's just as germane as any other story out there.
yeah,
I mean, I'm currently doing uh, something that is it's a horror movie, right?
yeah,
And it's about relationships, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to change the world or be redemptive. But it will be entertaining and it's escapism,
yeah,
and that's got its own level of
yeah,
validity. But it's not the social. There's no real social contract that's going to be enhanced because of it.
yeah,
So I think, it comes down to the execution, but stay close to that because I think you're onto something that's got some chops to it, and maybe it's just about threading in a few things. Well, that would be the Keimino.
yeah,
Uh, that's where the Keimino community comes in by saying, okay, I really like what you're doing here. And I think over here, if you added this component, you might find that it clarifies the other. So
yeah,
there's a great validity around what you're trying to achieve with Keimino. It's a great idea.
yeah. I want to say just thanks, Gary, for just jumping on with me and having a conversation. It means a lot. One, I just love having conversations with you. I could probably talk with you about almost anything,
Mutually.
because you're just a great conversationalist. But thank you so much for jumping on, and I'm excited to see. I can't watch Bell Fibe because I'm not in Canada. But when it's on something where it's either YouTube or Vimeo or Amazon Prime, uh, in order to get it, I would love to actually see it, and I would love to be one of those clicks, even though I can't be on Bell Fibe. Um, Let me know when you're done, because I've now had enough conversations with it. I really want to see it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll certainly let you know once we know.
All
As
right.
soon as we know, you'll be the second to know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
This has been a joy. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Joe.